Conversation with Harry Swartz, home at 65 Cedar Street, Akron, taped by Gladys Brown.
Dan Corbett and I worked for that years, and he always.
There are different rooms around the house.
Well, those rooms were all, they're narrower at the center than they are at the outside. Most, that is, they were. They've probably been changed in there now.
Very curious. Well, when we were in there, I noticed that they had used what we would think of as outside windows for closets. Really? You remember that?
Yeah.
They had cut off kind of a triangular bit. To square their room, they'd cut off a triangular bit, and often there were windows in the closet. Really? It's disappointing, the arrangement, I thought. Didn't you? Inside. But there's this old...
that wasn't like that when it was built.
Wasn't it?
Because I remember we were in there, we worked there a couple of days.
That lady's
sheeting up that thing up.
Yeah.
Wow.
She's still there.
The cupola on the top.
Yeah. Well, never was sheeted up, just the tubal board sat up there, and the cupola was up there, and the windows was in. There was a lot of work sheeting it up, because you had to fit around all them windows.
My wonderment. I've often wondered.
Everything them days is done with the old handsaw.
You know, I don't think the people today realize the number of horses that there used to be in this town. Because when I was a boy, now I put down the blacksmiths here that I remember, and I've got 5 of them. Remember Pat McNiff over here at the foot of Clinton Street.
Yeah.
Joe Ansel, who was down on John Street, right next to where I lived. Bill Clark, who was on Buffalo.
Right across the
Then there was farther up Buffalo Street on the same side, that'd be the east side, used to be an old rickety low building, and there was I can remember him, Mr. Harrington. Was that Jenny's father?
I don't know.
Had beautiful white whiskers.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had a blacksmith shop in there.
A blacksmith shop.
And then there was a McGrath. I believe his name was Joe.
Joe McGrath.
Yeah.
He was the Akron. You look back on your records, you'll see where he was the policeman in Akron.
Well, he was a policeman too, huh?
Yeah.
But he had a blacksmith shop down off the alley there, down below where Dr. Ulinoff is now.
Now, I'll show you something that he done. You see that scar right there?
Yeah.
Right there? Well, he done that. He was working, he come over and worked for the Cold Springs Construction one year over the protection. And we were sharpening, or he was sharpening shovel teeth, and he says, come here, he says, and strike for me, he says. Well, them shovel teeth were that long and probably that wide and thick, a lot of hammering on them. And you had to draw them out and make them sharp. They'd get dubbed over. And I told him 2 or 3 times, I said, Joe, I said, you're pulling that tooth too far away from the edge of that anvil. And the next thing I knew, the blood squirted out of my arm. I didn't hardly feel it.
Yeah.
And they took me down to Holland. See, Welpley his name was, wasn't it, Boy?
Yes, he was a physician then.
Well, you ought to know, you was there.
Yeah. Yes, I do. I know it was Dr. Welpley.
That was the first time I knew you.
Yeah. Welpley, I was teaching school.
And I held my thumb on that, and it wouldn't bleed. See, I'd take my thumb off, and Jesus would squirt like a deuce. And he monkeyed with it, and he said, well, he says, there's only one thing I can do. He said, you cut that artery off right on the joint. He says, you got 3 vessels open there. And I lay there on that cot, and he had it cauterized and didn't give you anything. And he'd take a pair of nippers, and he'd get a hold of them, pull them out, and he'd tie them. And he got all done, he poked them all back down in there, and I says to him, I says, my God, I says, where's that blood gonna go now? Oh, he says, that'll work around. Now every time I go to the hospital or anybody tries to take my blood pressure, they have a heck of a time.
Yeah. He cut, there was.
And Joe McGrath was.
Yeah. Now, there used to be a blacksmith up East Avenue, but I never got up there too much. And wasn't there a blacksmith shop up there too?
Well, there probably was, but that's a place I never got much. The furthest I got up East Avenue, there used to be a greenhouse on Ackerson Avenue, and they used to grow lettuce. That was run by Hoigs too. And in the winter, every Saturday, my brother and I'd go over there and we'd each get a basket full of lettuce, and we peddled that lettuce around, nickel a head. Great big nice heads of lettuce. And it was all walking, you didn't do anything else. And what I can remember of East Akron then was the old stone jug. Now, you probably don't remember. Do you remember it?
I remember not when it was open, but when it was...
It was still standing.
Yeah, it was a ruin, but it was still there.
Yeah. And boy, my brother'd always send me in there. And I hated to go in because I went to the kitchen and delivered the lettuce, and then I had to go into the bar room and collect my money, and everybody in there didn't feel good, as I see it. And I used to dread that more than anything I know.
The stone jug.
Yeah, the stone jug was a saloon.
Yes.
In that back street that goes off from East Avenue was right on that little bitty corner there,
Yeah.
wasn't it, back in
Yeah,
there?
right on that V there.
Yeah.
Well, if you remember the old stone jug, then you remember where it says up on that big stone headpiece, it used to say James Mahoney. You remember that?
Yeah. James Mahoney.
Well, I asked Barley Yeager once, I said, I was talking with Barley about it, and I says, what in the deuce did they paint that James Mahoney on that stone with? It never faded, never come out, nor nothing. Well, he says, you know what that is? He says the guy painted that on, went over and got a lot of soot out of the old Newman mill over there, chimney, and mixed kerosene oil with it, and that's what was painted on there, and that never come off. Was on there, Roy Miller.
Yeah, Roy owned that.
Roy owned it.
He tore it down.
He's the last one that owned it, and it was on there when Roy owned it. And that was nothing but black soot and kerosene oil.
Now, you mentioned a cider mill?
George Brown?
George Brown's, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Down on Brooklyn Street.
Yeah. He was Well, he run the cider mill down there, but he was a woodworker too.
Cabinet maker too, wasn't he?
Cabinet maker. And I don't know whether anybody, or I don't know what they ever done with them old seats that were in the Baptist church. They had the old seats in there, and he put some backs on all of them. They were all sawed out. Boy, he done a beautiful job. And I've always wondered what they ever done with them seats.
Well, they gave some of them to another Baptist church, and then some of them they gave to people in the church. I think they paid the church something for. There's 4, 5, 6 of them around town.
Yeah, well, they're really relics because
Now, was
George had quite a cider mill.
Was he the same Brown that had a furniture shop up on Main Street at one time?
No,
That's a different Brown, then.
that's a different Brown. No, they never come off there. She was quite an old character too. She was just as good a worker as old George was.
Yeah.
They was making cider down there one day, and us kids used to go down, and he always had a row of glasses sitting there, and he never cared how much cider you drink. When he was pressing it, you could stick your glass under anywhere and get what you wanted. And all of a sudden, old George says, Mary, shut down. She was out in the boiler room. She says, what's the matter, George? He says, them goddamn farmers put stones in the apples.
Stones in the apples.
Yes, yeah.
So they
Boy,
weigh
that
up?
would fix that
Yeah.
grinder, wouldn't it? And
Fine.
those teeth in the grinder, those edges. Brother. Now, I can remember that cider mill when it was in operation.
That was in the fall of the year. You'd always find us kids down there right after school drinking cider.
Wouldn't it be fun?
We used to go right in where Doc McPherson's barn used to be, right in there. We had a path down the hill and come out on Brooklyn Street. And you know, you was showing me the map about the wide creek. You know, in the spring of the year, that old dam down there, that ice would plug up. And the water, instead of coming down the creek, well, it practically started way up above that yet, up on the bend, up in the park. And that water come right down Brooklyn Street onto Jackson Street and down, went in the other side of the dam. Because we had an old maid down there, and she never would get out of Viney Winters.
Viney, yes, sir.
Yeah, Viney Winters.
She never would get out of that house until that water got so high that she was an old maid and she wanted somebody to carry her out. That's what they always said.
Gosh, and that house sat right beside the creek.
Right side of the creek on that side of the road.
Yeah, little, gosh, was there one room in it or two? Well, if there was two, there was a lot of room. What was this over where Agway is now, in that area? There used to be quite a pond over there.
Pond. Well, down the pond wasn't right where Agway is. The pond was back a little bit further. That was Linder's Pond. This property in here, that's what my deed starts off from, Linder's. And all this property in here, this farm, belonged to a fellow by the name of Lindner. And that pond was down. That was our the best skating pond we used to have in the winter.
Now, at one time, there was a little low shacky building in there. And then a narrow gauge railroad went out to the tracks. Went across the pond. They had some, what was?
That must have been when Savage was in there with his veneer works. He was in there in 19... Oh, gosh. About 1912, 13.
Now, I know we kids used to speak of that as the cheese box factory. Now, I wonder if this veneer that he was making was formed in
his veneer that he was making was for these cheap baskets. That is, these baskets you get now.
I see.
Because we were making, my dad and I were making baskets just about that time for a couple of years, but
I remember the pond and that narrow gauge track that ran back to the little factory. There was always a pile of sawdust there. Yeah.
They used to, well, their veneer machine, the stuff they veneered was about 5 foot wide, the logs. They had this big vat in there, and they'd have to steam them and cook them for a couple of days before they could veneer them. Then they'd put them on this machine, the veneer would roll off them. And then well, they didn't last too long. They built the concrete block house on Bloomingdale, right? Who lives in it now? Roy Swift.
Yes, Roy Swift lived there, just below Forest. Yeah.
Well, Savages built that house. And I thought at the time that they were going to building houses, but they pulled out of here and went, over, I can't tell you just where it was. I know I had a boiler and a steam engine when we was making baskets, and I wanted to, I had a lot of basswood sawed up that used to make the bottoms. And Savage had a big saw that you saw them blocks up with. He says, well, go get it. He says, that's over so-and-so. And he says, somebody there all the time. Boy, that thing was a heavy thing, and I rented a team of horses of George Bostic, and I drove over there. I had just a log rack, like, on the wagon. And I drove over there, and I got over there, and there wasn't a soul around that place. Nor I couldn't find anybody. And I looked at that thing, and I thought, by gosh, I hate to drive this team way back home and not take that thing back. And finally I thought, well, I jacked it up and got some rollers, and I monkeyed around, and I finally put that thing on the wagon. My dad said I didn't do it. but I did.
Now, tell us about your first acquaintance with your husband.
Well, I met him in Holland, New York. I was teaching school there. Let's see, I had the second, third, and fourth grade. We had a, you know, teach with the teachers first and second, and the one at third, fourth, and fifth, and five and sixth, and the upstairs. And then as we went upstairs, it was a high school. Now, let me see. There was a principal from East Pembroke, I think he was from. And he was, at one time, had taught in Holland, too. No, I met Harry when he was working for Forrestal's.
But you knew about this accident with his arm.
Well, I didn't know anything about that.
Oh.
See, that was before.
Oh.
See, I went over there to teach school.
I see.
Yeah, I was there 3 years, and then Harry and I were married. So.
And then you came here and you taught in Akron a long time.
Yes, I taught in Akron, yes. I had first grade. I was in the old corner school, the first school here, the big brick one, you know, where the town hall is now, or the. And Mr. Boyd was the principal. Victor Boyd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what year were you in there?
Let's see, it must have been in, let's see, I was married in 22, so it must have been in 23. And then we went over, then the classes started in large. Then I went over to teach fifth grade. I went from the first I had first grade, and then then there was Mr. Boyd told us, he says, well, I've got to divide the classes. So Miss Weidler, Frank Weidler, remember? You probably remember her, Kelsey. Well, she taught part of the grade and in the building, and I went over at the library. They had the rest of our school was over at the library, our class that year. And then, let's see, then I went up to school and I taught, oh, wait a minute. I was just trying to think,
Well, you was off quite a while.
oh, yes, let's see. Well, Billy was born. I was pregnant for Billy, became pregnant for Billy. And then, didn't I come up to school up in the,
Down
Bloomingdale, was that the one? Or what, yeah. And then I had Mary Ann. Then I taught over to South Newstead.
to Swift Mills.
No, I didn't, I never taught at Swift Mills. Gladys Simon's taught down there. And Mr. Mann, you remember Mr. Mann?
Yes.
He taught down there, too. And then I went down to relieve a teacher. I quit after Mary Ann was born. And I went down to substitute for a teacher, and she couldn't come back. She'd had an operation, appendix operation, and it wasn't very successful. So I taught in, over there where, what was that teacher's name there, the one that lived over there? Stacia Ogden. Yeah, I taught with Stacia over there, and I had the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade over there. And then I was off, or didn't go back to teach there. Then I went to South Newstead and taught in District 14. Then the new school was built up here, and then Mr. Esperson was principal of the elementary, and he come over and told me, see, I had a permanent license, see, so he made me come into the school up here. So I went in as a 5th grade teacher up here. And
What year did you retire?
62.
Uh-huh.
I retired in 62. Then I was right up into school then. Because we went from 5th grade, we had 5th and 6th grade one year. Then there was an opening in the 4th grade, and Mrs. Weeks and Mrs. Williams and I asked for the 4th grade because the 4th grade, the teachers had wanted the 5th grade. So we exchanged grades then. And that's when I finished in 62 out of the 4th grade up in Akron.
before the new elementary building was built? Or after? You were in the new building,
Oh,
the
building,
new
too.
elementary.
Yeah, the new elementary building, yes.
I couldn't remember what year that was built.
Yeah. Well, I can't tell you now what year. You know, Mr.
I
Brown?
don't remember either.
Let's see, I was trying to think.
Jimmy Gerber was a little boy, I know
Yeah,
that.
that's,
He was out there bossing the workmen.
yeah. He was. Yeah, his mother had first grade. Doris was first grade teacher. No, I taught in the old building too. You know, I taught on the one on the corner there. And then I went up to school, up to this other one. I think were you over there then, Mr. Brown? And I taught 5th grade there.
When everything was in one building, high school and grades,
high school
yes.
and all.
We came in 1950.
Yeah, and I was over there, had 5th grade. And then we went over to
The new one.
When was the brick elementary building on the corner of Church and John Street built, would you say?
Gosh, I don't know. What was it, Harry? Do you remember?
Before your time?
Oh, before my time, I started school there. Of course, I was 6 years old,
Yeah.
but it was built long before that. That was a shame. They ever tore that building down.
Looked like a nice building.
Well,
We
that
saw
building was a
picture
better-
yesterday.
That building was a better building than they got right there now,
Yeah, it was a good building.
when you come right down to it.
Well, then what did they do for a high school back in those days?
Right next to
Well,
the sign
they
temple.
had
They had
the
the,
lower rooms was the grades, and the upstairs was the high school,
in the brick building.
in the brick building.
Yes.
And then they built the stone
Then
building.
they
Expanded, they built another
expanded
building.
and built
Well, they
the
built another building, separate, in 1908.
1908, the old high school.
The old
was
high
built.
school, the one that burnt down.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh, now, there's one other thing I was curious about on that 1909 map. A big development was laid out where the high school is now. Lockwood Streets, or Lockwood Park or something. Nothing came of it, right?
No, was that one of George Ralph's projects?
What's that?
He had a subdivision all planned up where the school is now, up on that east side of Bloomingdale.
No, a subdivision up there was, the Akron, cause the,
Akron Realty?
was Fred Jackson and Hank Avery and Jim Thomas, the three of them. They owned that.
Did he ever build a house?
No, John Bartram and I bought 2 lots up there, and we was gonna build a couple of houses on it, and I don't know why we never got started. Well, John was an ornery son of a gun to work with anyhow. I didn't know whether I wanted to work with him or not, but we bought 2 lots up there. We let him go back. And then Gene Forrester bought it.
Then the school bought from him when they were ready to build.
From him. We built Gene Forrester's house there.
Fred?
I don't like that fellow there. I'm afraid of him. He's a German fellow, you know?
Well, he's a very nice fellow to converse with anyway. Do you know him?
Yeah, oh yeah, Richard,
Yeah, Dick Joe
Richard Eulenberg.
Eulenberg. And he would make a good speaker if he really speak the way he talks to you. He's had a lot of experiences over in Poland,
Oh,
and
yes, well, yes.
Lithuania, and so on.
Yes, he worked on Volkswagens, didn't he?
I guess so.
That's what they said.
But his family were a refugee family, you see, and they had to flee from Hitler's.
He told us one night he told us that they walked across, had to walk clear across Poland
Just imagine.
when he was a kid.
Well, I'll tell you, the one that would have the experience if anyone wanted to talk to would be Mrs. Mosier. But she, she wouldn't talk to you. I don't think she'd tell you what.
Probably not.
No, I think Dr. Mosier told me one time that, I think it was her mother. It was either a mother and Mrs. Mosier's mother, and either a brother or a sister was put in one of these camps, concentration camps, and was gassed. Dr. Mosier told me that one time, because when I was over in District 14, he had to come over to their little school over there, and he told me, he says, we got word. He said that Beatrice's mother, and I can't remember now whether he said a sister or a brother was gassed. They finally got the words, that's what happened to him.